Have you ever wondered why your grocery bill keeps climbing, even though politicians keep saying inflation is under control? What if I told you that the real story behind rising prices involves a complex web of hidden economic forces that most people never see coming? Today we're diving deep into the secret mechanics of inflation that economists don't want you to understand, because once you see how this system really works, you'll never look at money the same way again. Let's start with something that might shock you. When you hear about inflation rates on the news, those numbers are essentially marketing. The official inflation rate is calculated using something called the Consumer Price Index. But here's the kicker. This index excludes some of the biggest expenses in your life. Housing costs, which make up the largest portion of most people's budgets, are measured using a method called owner's equivalent rent, rather than actual housing prices. This means that when house prices skyrocket by 30 or 40%, the official inflation numbers barely budge. But that's just the beginning of how the system masks the true cost of living increases. The government regularly adjusts the basket of goods they measure, removing items that become too expensive and replacing them with cheaper alternatives. They call this substitution bias correction, but what it really means is that when steak becomes unaffordable, they just switch to measuring hamburger instead and pretend nothing happened. This manipulation of statistics serves a crucial purpose for those in power. Social security payments, government wages, and countless contracts are tied to official inflation rates. By keeping these numbers artificially low, the government saves billions, while your purchasing power silently erodes. It's a brilliant sleight of hand that transfers wealth from ordinary citizens to institutional players. Now let's talk about the real drivers of inflation that operate behind the scenes. Most people think inflation happens when there's too much money chasing too few goods. And while that's partially true, the reality is far more sophisticated. Modern inflation is largely driven by what economists call supply chain bottlenecks. But these aren't random occurrences. They're often engineered. Consider how just a few massive corporations control entire industries. In agriculture, 4 companies control 70% of the beef market. In technology, a handful of manufacturers produce the majority of semiconductors. When these companies coordinate their actions, either explicitly or through market dynamics, they can create artificial scarcity that drives prices up across entire sectors. The financial system amplifies these effects through something most people have never heard of: derivative markets. When commodity prices start rising, speculators pile into futures contracts, creating a feedback loop that pushes prices even higher. A drought in one region becomes a global price spike because financial markets treat food like any other investment vehicle. Your dinner becomes someone else's portfolio diversification. Here's where it gets really interesting. Central banks, which are supposed to control inflation, actually have very limited tools to address these structural issues. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, they're essentially trying to cool down an entire economy to address price increases in specific sectors. It's like turning down the thermostat in your entire house because one room is too hot. This creates a perverse situation where the cure for inflation often becomes worse than the disease. Higher interest rates make borrowing more expensive, which hurts small businesses and workers, while large corporations with cash reserves can actually benefit from reduced competition. The very policies designed to fight inflation end up concentrating more economic power in fewer hands. But there's an even deeper layer to this story that involves international currency dynamics. The US dollar serves as the world's reserve currency, which gives America an enormous advantage in the global inflation game. When other countries experience currency devaluation, their citizens face immediate price increases for imported goods. But Americans are somewhat insulated from this because most international trade happens in dollars. This arrangement, known as the petrodollar system, allows the United States to export its inflation to other countries. When the Federal Reserve prints money, some of that inflation gets absorbed by foreign economies that need dollars for trade. It's essentially a hidden tax on the rest of the world that subsidizes American consumption. However, this system is starting to crack. Countries like China and Russia are increasingly conducting trade in their own currencies, and central banks worldwide are diversifying away from dollar reserves. As this trend accelerates, Americans may find themselves facing the full weight of decades of monetary expansion that was previously shared with the global economy. Energy markets play a crucial role in this hidden inflation mechanism. Oil prices affect everything from transportation costs to fertilizer production, but energy markets are heavily manipulated by both government policies and private speculation. When you see gas prices spike, it's rarely due to actual supply shortages. More often, it's the result of refinery maintenance schedules, strategic petroleum reserve releases, or geopolitical tensions that may or may not have real economic impact. The renewable energy transition adds another layer of complexity. While green energy promises lower long-term costs, the transition period involves massive infrastructure investments and supply chain disruptions that show up as inflation in everything from electricity bills to electric vehicle prices. The costs of this transition are being socialized while the benefits flow primarily to large corporations and wealthy investors. Let's examine how housing inflation works, because this affects everyone. The housing market operates on multiple levels that most people don't see. At the surface level, you have supply and demand, not enough houses for the number of buyers. But underneath, you have institutional investors buying up entire neighborhoods, converting rental properties to short-term vacation rentals, and foreign capital treating real estate as a safe haven investment. Zoning laws and building regulations, often influenced by existing property owners who want to protect their values, artificially restrict housing supply. Meanwhile, low interest rates encourage speculation and drive asset prices higher. When the Federal Reserve finally raises rates to cool inflation, housing becomes even less affordable because mortgage payments increase, but prices often stay elevated because sellers refuse to take losses. The technology sector contributes to inflation in ways that traditional economic models don't capture. When a few large tech companies dominate markets, they can essentially set prices without meaningful competition. The subscription economy means you're paying monthly fees for services that used to be one-time purchases. Cloud computing allows companies to continuously extract revenue from software that used to be sold once. These platform monopolies create what economists call network effects, where the value of a service increases as more people use it. This makes it nearly impossible for competitors to challenge established players, allowing them to raise prices without losing customers. Your smartphone, your streaming services, your software subscriptions, they're all part of a carefully orchestrated system designed to maximize recurring revenue. Healthcare represents perhaps the most egregious example of hidden inflation mechanics. The healthcare industry has created multiple layers of middlemen: insurance companies, pharmacy benefit managers, medical device distributors, each taking their cut while providing questionable value. A medication that costs $5 to manufacture might cost patients hundreds of dollars after passing through this system. The complexity is intentional because it makes price discovery impossible. Hospitals charge different prices to different patients for identical services based on their insurance status. The same procedure might cost $3,000 or $30,000 depending on factors that have nothing to do with the actual cost of providing care. Insurance companies benefit from this opacity because it allows them to appear valuable while actually just redistributing costs in ways that favor their business model. When healthcare costs rise, they simply pass those increases to employers and individuals through higher premiums, deductibles, and copays. So what does all this mean for you? Understanding these hidden mechanisms gives you power to make better decisions. When you see official inflation numbers, remember they're just one piece of a much larger puzzle. The real inflation you experience depends on your specific situation and spending patterns. Focus on building skills and acquiring assets that tend to maintain value during inflationary periods. Understand that the system is designed to benefit those who own productive assets, rather than those who rely solely on wages. Most importantly, recognize that inflation isn't just an economic phenomenon. It's a political tool that redistributes wealth in ways that aren't immediately obvious. The next time someone tells you inflation is transitory or under control, you'll know to look beyond the headlines. The hidden economics behind inflation reveal a system that's far more complex and deliberately obscured than most people realize. Once you understand how this game is really played, you can start positioning yourself to benefit rather than just survive.